Greetings. In our discussion, we started speaking about the evil, rotten planning of Mordecai and his niece Esther, that has a book in the Jewish Christian book in the Old Testament. Now, because of Esther and Mordecai, the Israeli Jews, start thinking and re-evaluating their situation, how they were slaves in Egypt, how they suffered so much, in Palestine, from the Palestinian continuous wars, were slaves under the Palestinians most of the time. And then, came two empires against them, Assyria and Babylon, and they uprooted them from the land, and they mistreated them so bad back at Babylon. So now, when they are back, a bunch of Israelis, started thinking, how did we manage to come back? It was evil planning, rotten satanic planning, cheating Cyrus, pushing him to kill his wife and his prime minister, and then pushing him to allow the Israeli Jews to come back to the land. So the Masons started that at that time. They said, okay, in order for us to keep the goodwill and protect the Israeli nation, Israeli Jews, we have to have people like Mordecai and Esther. And we have to plant important people, like Esther reached, Cyrus, the king, the emperor of Persia, and how Mordecai, was the step ladder, one step at a time, when he started, going up the steps one by one from the street outside the door of the castle inside, and so important, with bribes and money and cheating so much. So the Masons started that time. And today the Masons, since that day, more than 2,400 to 500 years back, the Masons are planning how to infiltrate high places and be in command for the protection and the welfare of the Israeli Jews. And today, if you look at the US in the West, the Senate and the House, if they are not Israeli Jews, they are strong supporters. You have the Jewish lobby controlling, the decision in the House and the Senate. So the White House is completely controlled by the Jews in the West. All this, dates back to 2,500 years plan when the Masons started. And today they are in every high-ranking position all over the globe, all over the planet, as a matter of fact. Very well. Let's continue our story. So now who is coming back? Let's refresh your memories and tell you that the Lord or God of Israel plucked and uprooted the Israelis from the land. Let's go to the book of Ezra, chapter 5, verse 12. It says, but because our ancestors angered the Lord, the God of heaven, he gave them into the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, the Chaldean, king of Babylon, who destroyed this temple and deported the people to Babylon. He even removed from, listen to this. The house of worship that Solomon built was not called temple. Temple is a Babylonian terminology for the houses of worship in Babylon. So listen, here's the proof from their book. He even removed from the temple of Babylon the gold and silver articles of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar had taken from the temple in Jerusalem, and brought to the temple in Babylon. So temple, 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 temple. So this is a temple is a Babylonian word given, assigned to the houses of worship of idols in Babylon. So temple is not what Solomon used to name the house of worship he built for the Lord. This is what the Israelis took from the Babylonian during the slavery in Babylon. How? Solomon was before, right? No. This book came after Babylonian slavery. We will read later on. So yes, Solomon built a house of worship before, but when they came back and they, generated this book, they invented and written this book, then they called what Solomon built a temple, which is a lie. A temple is dedicated to the houses of worship at Babylon. All right, very well. Let's go to 2 King chapter 22, verse 8. 2 King 22, 8. Hilkiah the high priest said to Shaphan the secretary, I have found the book of the law in the temple of the Lord. He gave it to Shaphan, who read it. Then Shaphan the secretary went to the king and reported to him. Now this is a huge lie, a big bird. Why? First of all, we will read later how Nebuchadnezzar destroyed what they call the Temple of Solomon, the house that Solomon built. Nebuchadnezzar destroyed, completely destroyed. What the hell, this book is talking about? Finding the book in the temple. There was no temple to start with. We will read more about this later on. A solid proof from the book. But the main idea here that he says, we found the book. What does it mean? It means they lost it. How did they lose it? Nebuchadnezzar burned all the books because they were written in Hebrew language, the language of their enemies from the Israeli Jews. So they lost the book, and now we have a new book. How did this new book come to existence? We will read later from a man named Ezra. And they call him the man who knows about the law of God, of Israel. So we found the book in the temple. There was no temple. It was rubble, flat down on the ground. There was no temple whatsoever. And anyway, not even a rubble, everything have changed. 100 years passed. So the whole area changed. Maybe, a new city came about. From the rocks of the temple, they built, homes. The Canaanites, the Palestinians, they built so many homes and the big city. And 100 years is a long time. Anyway, we will read more about this. All right. So Ezra chapter 7, verse 12. Artaxerxes, king of kings, to Ezra the priest, teacher of the law of the God of heaven. So this king of kings is sending a letter to Ezra. What is he calling him? He's calling him to Ezra the priest. The priest. So he is not a messenger. He is not a prophet. He is not assigned by God of Israel. Israel never claimed that he is a prophet from God. But he was a priest. Looks like in slavery, during slavery in Babylon, the Israelis, who still worship, they used to build small, in their homes perhaps, they used to worship and they hire priests. And this is one of the priests. His name is Ezra. And in the last video I told you, he gathered the information from the Torah and the book of David, Zabur, from the old people who hate God so much, So this book came so rotten, insulting every man of the Lord, even God himself. So now this King of Kings is sending a letter and calling him the priest, teacher of the law of the God of heaven. Such a believer, this pagan king, such a believer. So verse 13 says, now I decree that any of the Israelites in my kingdom, including priests and Levites who volunteer to go to Jerusalem with you, may go. You are sent by the king and his servant, his 7 advisors, to inquire about Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. In your hand. Wow. But Hilkiah said, we found it in the temple. So you see, say too many lies, you have to fall. And somebody may catch. And I did. I caught it. So now, before going to Jerusalem and Judah, this priest, Ezra, had the book in his hand. Read it again. You are sent by the king and his 7 advisors to inquire about Judah and Jerusalem with regard to the law of your God, which is in your hand. Which is in your, he wrote in slavery, in Babylonian captivity. And this is what Hilkiah will find later on. He will say he found it in the temple. What temple? Miserable. Ezra chapter 3 verse 6 says, on the first day of the 7th month, they began to offer burnt offerings to the Lord. Listen to this, please, carefully. Though the foundation of the Lord's temple had not yet been laid. We don't even have foundation. We have nothing. We have to build from scratch. The foundation were not laid yet. Not the temple. Even the foundation that we're going to build over this temple were not laid yet. So where Hilkiah found the book? There is no temple. Where those rotten Israeli Jews are searching for the house of worship Solomon built. Does the book says that they found the temple of Solomon, they are building on the same place, on the same site. So what's the story with the Israeli Jews today, with the Palestinians? This is the big question. We'll answer next time. Take care.